I'm going to explain a neo-noir film called Sin City. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The city of Basin, Washington is a cruel and wretched place, home to a collection of corrupt and tragic stories. Prologue, the customer's always right. A woman stands alone on a building rooftop with a somber look. Just then, the salesman, dressed in a tuxedo, comes by and flirts with her. The woman is immediately captivated by him, and they even share a kiss. Unbeknownst to her, the salesman is an efficient assassin for hire, and she is his latest customer. They share an embrace before he shoots her once with a silencer. He says he will never know what she was running from, but he will cash her check in the morning. Part 1, That Yellow Bastard. A lone police detective drives down the road as he mulls over the events to come. Down to his last day on the job while packing a heart condition in his old age, Detective Hartigan pushes himself to do one last thing. A sick and twisted killer is out, reveling in his demented hunt. His fourth and latest victim is an 11-year-old girl named Nancy Callahan. Hartigan stops the car to meet with his partner Bob. He dissuades Hartigan from going after the child assaulter and serial killer Rourke Jr. He is, after all, the son of the most powerful and corrupt man in the city. If anything happened to his son, Senator Rourke would have Hartigan and Bob killed. Bob says he'll call for backup, but Hartigan plans to go in the abandoned warehouse himself. Hartigan makes his move and creeps behind a corner to see Schlub and Clump, Rourke Jr.'s goons. While Hartigan manages to knock them both out, he starts experiencing heart pain which has him lying on the floor. Still, he pulls himself up and tells himself to prove that he's still worth something. Hartigan enters the warehouse where Rourke Jr. and several henchmen hold Nancy captive. Once he's inside the room, he shoots down the henchman first. Rourke Jr. fires a shot, but he only manages a flesh wound. Rourke Jr. tries to escape with Nancy in his arms but winds up on the pier with nowhere to run. Hartigan shoots his ear off, leaving him to the ground, and Nancy moves to the side of the pier. He blows Jr.'s arm off, then his groin so he could never force himself on anyone again. Just as things seem all clear, Hartigan is shot several times in the back by his own partner Bob. Bob shot Hartigan to gain Senator Rourke's favor and keep himself safe. Thinking that he would be dead, Hartigan slumps down on the pier, but he takes comfort in knowing that he was able to save a young girl. Hartigan then wakes to find himself in a hospital bed. Several visitors come by. Among them was his wife Eileen, who plans to divorce him, and Senator Rourke, who paid for all his medical bills, intending to keep Hartigan alive to suffer a life of pain. Hartigan finds out that he's been framed for violating Nancy, and now the whole world is against him. Still, he keeps his mouth shut to protect Nancy. Nancy comes by and tells Hartigan no one believes her even though she says he saved her. Hartigan then tells her to go along with it for her own safety. Nancy promises that she'll write to him every week under the name Cordelia. 8 years pass, Hartigan is convicted, and the only thing keeping him going is Nancy's letters. Hartigan still hasn't confessed to his charges, but Senator Rourke wants to take that away from him too. One day, Nancy's letters stop for 2 months until finally, he receives an envelope containing a severed human finger. Hartigan goes on a rage and screams in his cell, and that's when everything goes black for him. The next thing he knows, a disfigured man with yellow skin sits in his jail cell while carrying with him an imposingly horrid stench. The yellow man hits him, and he's knocked out cold. The following day, Hartigan calls his attorney Lucille and confesses. With this, he gets his parole and his freedom from prison. Now free, Hartigan goes to look for Nancy to see if she's safe. After tracking her down to a bar called Katie's, he goes there and is surprised to find that the woman dancing in the center stage was Nancy. Hartigan realizes that he was tricked, the cut-off finger was just a bluff, and now he's lead the Rourke goons to Nancy. From behind him, he sees the yellow man watching his movements. Hartigan tries to leave before Nancy realizes who he is, but it was too late. When Nancy sees Hartigan, she runs up, embraces him and kisses him. Now, the yellow man knows what Nancy looks like. Hartigan tells Nancy he's made a mistake, and they have to leave immediately. The two of them get to Nancy's car, and they bolt on through the highway. Eventually, the yellow man catches up to them and begins to shoot at their car. A violent pursuit ensues as the yellow man continues to pelt their car with bullets in a relentless and uncontrolled fashion. Hartigan keeps his composure and fires off one shot that hits straight through the yellow man's neck. His car crashes, so Hartigan and Nancy step out to confirm the kill. A few paces away from their vehicle, Hartigan spots a trail of blood, but no body. The two of them then head on to a motel to rest. On the way there, Hartigan remains haunted by the yellow man's stench. The two of them sit next to each other on the couch in silence. Finally, Nancy tells Hartigan that she's held feelings of love for him all these years, and Nancy tries to kiss Hartigan. After much hesitation, Hartigan kisses Nancy back, but he stops himself after a while, saying she's just a child and that it would be wrong. Just then, the yellow man appears inside the room. He had snuck inside their car on their way there when they were out looking for his body. He takes Hartigan out, and the next thing he knows, he's hung up on a rope with a small table to keep him aloft. The yellow man holds Nancy menacingly and relishes his victory in front of Hartigan. He reveals himself to be Rourke Jr., now horribly disfigured because of the severe injuries that Hartigan caused. Furious and hungry for vengeance, Jr. intends to kill Hartigan and have his way with Nancy using the new artificial replacements his father had done on his groin area. Hartigan pleads to Nancy that no matter what Rourke Jr. does to her, she mustn't scream. Jr. kicks down the small table that kept Hartigan suspended, leaving him to choke while he and Nancy leave in her car. Though he's on the brink of giving up, Hartigan pushes himself one last time to save Nancy. He smashes the windows open and takes a broken piece of glass to cut himself loose. Moments later, Schlub and Clump enter Hartigan's room, expecting to pick up a dead body. Hartigan takes them by surprise and knocks them out, but not before getting them to tell him where Nancy and Junior are. Hartigan seizes Schlub and Clump's car and takes their guns before heading to Nancy's location. When he gets there, he stealthily uses a knife to take out the henchman. Meanwhile, at the upper deck of the building, Junior uses a whip to make Nancy scream, but just as Hartigan advised her, she kept quiet the whole time. She then makes fun of Junior for being unable to get aroused without hearing a scream from his victims. Just then, Hartigan shows up with a pistol in his hand. Junior taunts him, saying he probably can't even lift his arm, and as if to prove his point, Hartigan falls over in pain from his heart condition. Junior laughs and pushes Nancy away to get a better position to stab Hartigan. But just as he's about to bring down his knife on him, Hartigan looks up and plunges his knife into Junior's stomach. Hartigan's trick pays off as he beat Junior into the ground, brutally ripping his groin before finally pummeling his skull into wet meat. When Hartigan and Nancy step outside, he says goodbye to Nancy and tells her he intends to clear his name and go for Senator Rourke. Nancy leaves in her car, and Hartigan decides that she would be safer if he were dead. Without him to mess with, Rourke will no longer have any use for Nancy. Hartigan then takes his gun and shoots himself in the head. Part 2, The Hard Goodbye. After a one-night stand with a beautiful woman named Goldie, Marv is horrified to find her dead the following morning. He realizes that whoever killed her did it quietly as she died right there beside him. A few moments later, Marv hears police sirens outside the motel room. It doesn't take him long to realize that the killer is trying to set him up for the murder. The police, now at the front of his door, demand him to come out. Marv springs into action as he busts down the door with the two cops flying through the hallway. Marv, being a hulking powerhouse of a man, completely overwhelms the heavily armed platoon of cops. He dives down the building and leaps out. A speeding police car aims to run him down, but Marv pulls out a dropkick right into the front window and beats the two policemen sitting in the front seat. Marv takes the car and drives away. Later, he visits his parole officer Lucille to receive some medicine for his mental condition. He then goes to his mother's house to retrieve Gladys, his most prized handgun. Marv leaves, and for the following days, he goes out on a rampage in pursuit of the truth. His trail of blood and bodies eventually ends at a church with a corrupt priest. The priest reveals that the man behind it all is Cardinal Rourke, brother to Senator Rourke. Furthermore, the priest gives up the location of their hideout, which is the farm. He shoots the corrupt priest and gets to his car. Just then, a woman who looked identical to Goldie drives by and runs him over several times before trying to shoot him. The woman drives off, leaving Marv rattled. At the farm, Marv is sneaking about to get a better look at the area when suddenly, a wolf appears and growls at him. Refusing to kill an animal, Marv tries to calm the wolf down, but it attacks him, so Marv knocks it out cold. At that moment, a strange man with gleaming eyeglasses appears from within the farm to attack Marv. Quick and quiet, he uses his sharp claws to take out Marv's vision, then overwhelms him with his swift movements. After noting his elusive actions, Marv realizes that this was Goldie's killer. The strange man then picks up a mallet and hits Marv in the head, knocking him out. Marv wakes up to find himself in a confined room with several women's heads mounted on the wall like hunting trophies. In the corner of the room, he finds Lucille naked. Left with just one hand, a traumatized Lucille tells Marv that the strange man eats the women's bodies. She howls in terror as she recalls the man eating her hand right in front of her. Moments later, Marv hangs onto the small window built with iron bars on the top of the room. A car drives by and calls for the strange man by the name of Kevin. Marv brutally pulls out the entire iron window right out of the wall. The two exit the room and make their way to the forest. Several cops descend from a helicopter, and as Marv gets ready for a fight, Lucille knocks him out with a rock, thinking that speaking with the police would be a good idea. Lucille walks up to the policemen and tries to reason with them, not realizing they're all corrupt. The tattooed policeman shoots Lucille dead several times with a submachine gun. By the time Marv gets back up his feet, he sees Lucille's corpse. This fuels him to kill every policeman with a hand axe. With Lucille and Goldie dead, Marv sets out to kill Cardinal Rourke. Marv visits Old Town after having received information from Lucille beforehand that Goldie was a hooker. And if she were a hooker, then that would mean she has connections in Old Town. It's not long until he encounters the woman who looked exactly like Goldie. The woman greets him with a nice shot to the head. When Marv wakes up, he is tied to a chair while surrounded by the women of Old Town, including Gail and Becky. Wendy, the Goldie look-alike, hits Marv several times. Finally, she tells Marv that she's Goldie's twin sister, and she wants him dead for killing her. Marv immediately clears things up with her, and when Wendy realizes that he's telling the truth, she opts out of shooting him. Together, Marv and Wendy decide to go after Goldie's killer. Marv returns to the farm with Wendy, but he insists on doing this alone, making Wendy leave. Marv then proceeds to set up traps to catch Kevin. He throws a Molotov right into the building where Kevin was. Before it could explode, Kevin jumps out the window and runs straight into the forest to find Marv. Kevin leaps over the steel wire that Marv set up, remaining unrelenting in his pursuit. Marv lets Kevin dish out his claws and takes the damage, and when he was close enough, Marv uses a handcuff to trap Kevin. With one cuff attached to Kevin and the other to himself, he knocks Kevin out cold. Wendy then appears and points a gun at Kevin. She says she has to be the one to do him in since he killed her sister. Despite her sentiment, Marv knocks her unconscious and leaves her in the car. He wants to torture Kevin and make him suffer before he dies. After a while, it's revealed that Marv had cut off Kevin's arms and legs, leaving him for his pet wolf. But the thing that bothers Marv was that Kevin stayed silent, even smiling the entire time he was being tortured. Finally, when the wolf has had its fill, Marv finishes Kevin off and cuts his head. Marv takes Wendy to Nancy to keep her safe. Nancy is a good friend of Marv ever since he helped keep her safe from some goons before. He then leaves for Cardinal Rourke's place, where he's more than able to kill his way into the Cardinal's room. There, he confronts him about Goldie's death. The Cardinal admits to it and reveals that he ate Kevin's victims with him to consume their souls. Marv kills him, but the cops arrive to shoot Marv enough times to hospitalize him. After several months of living through tubes in the hospital, Marv is assaulted by several corrupt policemen, beating him up to get a confession. They intend to incriminate him for the death of the Cardinal and frame him for Kevin's victims. Marv resists up until they threaten to hurt his mother. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, Marv begrudgingly confesses and gets sentenced to death row. Before his death sentence, Wendy visits him. Marv mistakenly calls her Goldie and corrects himself, but Wendy tells him that he can call her Goldie. The two of them lie down, and Marv enjoys one last moment of joy. Marv is then strapped to an electric chair to be slain. Being the ridiculously resilient beast of a man that Marv is, the executioner has to give 2 full electric charges before Marv could finally be killed. His last thoughts go out to Goldie and the night that they shared. Part 3, The Big Fat Kill. Shelley, a barmaid from Katie's, is being harassed by her abusive ex-boyfriend Jackie along with his group of thugs. Jackie demands that Shelley open the door to let him in. Inside the room, Dwight McCarthy stands next to Shelley, telling her to open the door so he could get rid of them. She eventually lets Jackie and his goons in the room while Dwight hides in the bathroom. Jackie notices that Shelley is wearing a man's shirt, so he hits Shelley, making her fall. Jackie then goes to use the bathroom. Unbeknownst to him, Dwight's hiding from behind the shower curtain. Just as he finishes peeing, Dwight stands behind him with a knife to his throat, warning him never to approach Shelley again. He adds that Jackie made a big mistake by forgetting to flush the toilet since Dwight would then push his head in the toilet bowl, drowning him in his own urine. Jackie passes out for a moment, and when he gains consciousness, he searches the room for Dwight, but he's already gone. Jackie then leaves with his gang of thugs. Shelley looks down from her apartment building to see Jackie leaving in his car with his boys. From the window ledge, Dwight stands right next to where Shelley was watching. He tells her that Jackie is a menace and has to be stopped. Just as he is jumping off the building, Shelley shouts something to him, but he barely hears it. Dwight then rushes to his car and pursues Jackie and his friends. Suddenly, a police car appears from behind Dwight, and he starts feeling nervous. He mulls over whether he should bribe the cop or not, but before he could decide, the police move past him and follow Jackie's car. Jackie and his friends are alarmed by the cops, so Jackie, who is on the wheel, decides to move straight into Old Town. As they enter Old Town territory, the police car immediately turns back. The women in Old Town and the police have an unwritten agreement not to mess with each other, considering it's more beneficial for both parties. Jackie immediately gets in trouble in Old Town when he spots Becky, a young streetwalker walking home from her day shift. Becky rejects Jackie, saying she's already tired and that she wants to go home. Still, Jackie remains insistent and begins to behave rudely towards her. Dwight follows by closely, then takes out his gun, but just as he was about to move closer, he is stopped by Gail, his ex-lover, and Old Town's authority. Gail tells him everything is under control and that she and the women of Old Town have been watching Jackie ever since they entered. It's then revealed that there are women on top of the rooftops with weapons in their hands. One of them is Miho, an Asian woman skilled in martial arts and in dual sword wielding. Eventually, Jackie finally goes too far when he pulls out a gun on Becky, prompting Miho to assassinate all 4 of Jackie's friends swiftly. Finally, Miho moves in on Jackie, taunting him. Dwight intervenes and tells Jackie to give up since he has no chance. Miho shoots a dart into Jackie's gun's barrel while Dwight was talking to him. Refusing to listen to him, Jackie decides to shoot his gun, and the barrel fires back straight into his forehead. With Jackie dizzy and dying, he sits down as Miho takes the killing blow. Dwight and the women of Old Town then start to clean up the corpses. Among the items that they retrieved from the bodies was a police badge. From that, they discover that Jackie was a policeman. This is a big issue because if the cops learn that Jackie died, their truce with the prostitutes will end, and the mob would be free to wage war on Old Town. This is when Dwight volunteers to take the bodies to the tar pits to stop the impending consequences. Gail argues against Dwight's plan at first, but she soon lets him. Before heading to the tar pits, Becky tells Gail she'll be heading home. Gail advises her not to call her mother since it would be risky to do so in their situation. Later on, Becky makes the call anyway. Dwight then heads out to the tar pits to dump the bodies, but suddenly, a group of mercenaries hired by mob boss Wallenquist shoots him in the chest. At the same time, Gail gets abducted by Wallenquist and gets taken to their base. Back at the tar pits, Dwight manages to survive the gunshot since he had Jackie's police badge in his chest pocket. Dwight then quickly shoots down the mercenaries, but a grenade is tossed from behind him. This sends him and the car falling straight into the pits. When Dwight awakens, he finds himself already half sunk in the tar pit. In front of him are 2 mercenaries taking Jackie's severed head as proof to break the cops' truce with Old Town. Dwight knows he couldn't get out of the pits, so he resigns himself to death. But just as he's about to pass out, Miho comes in and pulls him out of the pit. Together with the girls from Old Town, she tells him that Gail has been taken. Dwight and Miho then pursue the mercenaries. Miho takes out most of them, and Dwight goes after the man with Jackie's head as he flees to the sewers. Just as he is about to shoot him, an explosion blasts Dwight off his feet. The man comments that he mainly uses explosions as his main weapon, but before he can make his move on Dwight, Miho steps in and kills him. Afterward, Dwight hatches a plan to get Gail back. At the mob headquarters, Gail is furious to discover that it was Becky who betrayed them. Becky was offered money and freedom to give up Gail in Old Town. Just then, one of Wallenquist's goons gets shot by an arrow from the window. The arrow held a note that said Old Town will trade Gail for Jackie's head out back. Dwight waits atop a platform with Jackie's severed head in his hand. He looks over as Wallenquist and his goons file up in the narrow alleyway he chose as the battlefield. Dwight then gives Jackie's head to Wallenquist's man, and he gets Gail back. Suddenly, Dwight pulls out a remote and pushes the button. Jackie's head explodes, throwing off the mob. To their surprise, the women of Old Town appear from the rooftops, and they all rain down bullets over the group. All of them die except for Becky, who managed to sneak her way out. Dwight and Gail share a kiss over their victory on the battlefield. And for the following days, Becky checks out of the hospital and talks on the phone with her mother. She enters the elevator and sees the salesman, wearing a doctor's outfit. The salesman hands her a cigarette, calling her by name. Becky abruptly hangs up her phone, and she immediately understands her fate. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.